Welcome to the AFR Saints channel, where we provide you daily content on your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to leave your comments below and smash that like button. Who dat? What a week for LSU. What a weekend for LSU football. Tigers end up with 10 players taken in the draft. That is second among schools in this year's draft. Only Georgia and their record-setting 15 draft selections were more than LSU's 10. So one thing is abundantly clear is that talent is not the issue and has not been the issue at LSU. It started off, of course, with Derek Stingley on Thursday, the highest ever drafted cornerback. He ties the record for the highest ever drafted cornerback. I've shared my thoughts on that many times over. Stingley's a phenomenal player. Don't confuse it. He's going to be a perennial All-Pro, provided he stays healthy. Derek was awesome in 2019. I told you he dealt with there was a serious issue before the Mississippi State game in 2020. He battled injuries, but Derek's one of those guys that as soon as he went to as soon as he went to the combine and had these conversations with NFL teams, and they got to see his character, and they got to know him, and got to know his family, and they understood how savvy of a football player he is, and how much he can X and O, and you combine it with a 4.3, 840. This was a no-brainer. Derek Stingley's the best cornerback in this draft. He was always the best cornerback in this class. I'd take him 100 times out of 100 over Sauce Gardner. It's not a knock on Sauce Gardner. It's just that Derek Stingley is that dude, and he will be for a long time for the Houston Texans. The rest of the draft, I don't know that I could have projected any of it going the way it did, the rest of the draft, for the LSU players. Ed Ingram went in round 2 to the Minnesota Vikings with the 27th pick of round 2. And I am so fired up for Ed Ingram. Remember, he played as a freshman in 2017. I think we all know the stories by now. He was falsely accused of a crime that he didn't commit. He ended up missing a year and a half of his career, missed 2018 and then half of the 2019 season. He was reinstated for the second half of the championship season. Could have left then, didn't, wanted to put more film out there. Of course, the COVID season happens, which was a disaster. Could have left, didn't, came back. And quite honestly, I think Ed would even tell you, had an up and down year last year. But when you put on the tape and you see Ed Ingram and how much of a mauler he is, there is an undeniable characteristic of an interior offensive lineman that looks like a pro, and he did as a freshman in 2017. And maybe it's one of those things that because he ended up not playing in 18, only playing half a season in 19, because you didn't have a full season in 2020, maybe it's one of those things where because he didn't have the wear and tear, some teams might have liked that. And I think Minnesota got themselves a starting interior lineman in Ed Ingram. I love the Cordell Flott pick to the New York Giants. He goes in round 3 with the 17th pick of round 3. He becomes the third LSU player off the board. Flott is what today's game has become. He is a long, rangy corner in the slot. He at one point this season was graded by Pro Football Focus as the best nickel back in college football. For a third-round pick to get a guy that most base defenses now are nickel anyway, 5 defensive backs, it's going to be that dude. I love it wherever Flott was going to go, and he went in round 3. I was surprised to see Ty Davis-Price go in round 3, but I was fired up for him. Hester and I had a bet. He reminded me of this during draft night coverage, that that TDP, we had a wager whether or not Ty Davis-Price was even going to be drafted. And I didn't think he would. And halfway through this season, we were all calling for Corey Kiner to be LSU's feature back. Well, Kiner's now transferred, and Ty Davis-Price ended up with a 1,000-yard season and is a third-round pick of the 49ers. It's so interesting because a lot of the mock drafts you saw in projections for Ty Davis-Price had him as a 7th-round pick, maybe an undrafted free agent. To go in round 3 is a great compliment to him, but I think it also went to a perfect spot. And if you were watching our draft companion show, Hester even explained this about the Niners, where he said, look, the reason Ty Davis-Price really started to hit his stride in the second half of the 2021 season was all the zone read runs, which fit his skill set. And that's what San Francisco does. So that might be one of those situations where he is just the perfect running back in this draft class for the 49ers. On day 3, it got kicked off, pun intended, with Kade York. Kade York becomes the first ever place kicker drafted in program history. The first place kicker taken in this year's draft with the 19th pick, around 4. He goes to Cleveland. That's the unfortunate part, that he's going to Cleveland. But I guess it gives us another reason to use the Cleveland drop. Kade York is an NFL kicker. We all know it. He's got the leg. He's got the moxie. He has all of it. So congrats to Kade York. I just always think about when Cole Tracy was sitting in here back in 2020 or 2019, I guess, which would have been Kade York's freshman season. And he had some early season struggles. And I remember Cole Tracy sitting just to my immediate left, right there, saying, don't worry about it. He's the best kicker I've ever seen. He's going to be the best kicker in program history. And prophetic. Kade York became the best kicker in LSU history and was drafted. Neil Farrell to the Raiders. I like that pick a lot. Neil Farrell proved what a space-eating, a run stuffer he can be on the interior. There will be a spot on an NFL roster for him for a long time. I like Neil Farrell going in round 4 to the Raiders. Damon Clark, being very honest, I'm glad he got his name called. Because we see this all the time in the draft, where guys who are certainly worthy don't pass the medical at the combine, and they fall off of teams' boards entirely. They gave the example of Dylan Moses, who was a projected first-round pick, had the knee injury, went undrafted. A local guy, Derry Beckwith, who's a friend, been on the show. Derry has sat right here next to me and told this story for years. He was a projected third-round pick, goes to the combine, didn't pass the medical because of his knee. He went undrafted. Signed undrafted free agent with the Chargers. Like, it happens. Damon Clark was the best. Damon Clark had the best season of any linebacker in college football this past year. And he was worthy of being an early day 2 guy. But when you have a neck injury and you're talking about neck surgery, I can understand why there are teams that probably took Damon Clark off of their board. But for him to go in round 5, to be picked, and to be able to go to Dallas, I think is a great accomplishment for Damon Clark. I hate it that it wasn't a better result in the draft for him, which it would have been, but for the injury. But because of the injury, it wouldn't have been a surprise if he went undrafted altogether. So to see Damon Clark go in round 5 was awesome. I was fired up for Austin Dekulus. Nobody's played more games in the history of LSU football than Austin Dekulus. Of course, he's from Mamu, but he was playing high school ball in Texas when he signed with LSU. And so he gets to go home to the Houston Texans there, 6th-round pick. This is where the numbers started to build for LSU. Chasen Hines also went in round 6 to the New England with the last pick of round 6 to the New England Patriots. And that's where you start to look and you say some of these guys that were sort of borderline draft pick, undrafted free agents, they all heard their name called. And Andre Anthony was another one who went in round 7 to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Andre Anthony is the prototype rush end in today's NFL. But he's just been beset with injuries from his high school time at Carr all the way through his time at LSU. He never was able to stay healthy and play a full season. So if, in fact, Andre Anthony stays healthy, he's got a great chance to make the team in Tampa and have a nice NFL career, if he can stay healthy. But that's just what we don't know at this point. We'll have to wait and see. So in all, 10 LSU football players drafted. That's second only to Georgia this year. And certainly that's a further commentary on the state of the program and how it had fallen under Ed Orgeron and why the decision to move on from him had to be made. You had 10 players drafted. It was the second most in this draft class. You look at the others in the top 5, Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State. I mean, these were teams that were in the play, Cincinnati, that were in the playoff or right there on the verge of it. And LSU was 6-7. There was no excuse to have this much talent, to have the results LSU's had the last 2 years. The flip side of it is that's so encouraging because Brian Kelly is going to be able to recruit at LSU. He's going to continue stockpiling talent the way that LSU has and has continued to do for the last 25 years. But he's going to marry that talent with a competent coaching staff, with a plan, with a process, with a structure that just hasn't existed at LSU under the previous coaching staff. And when you build that foundation and that structure, that's built to last the same way it was when Nick came here. So that's the very encouraging part of it. And the other thing, too, is with this draft class now coming and going, that's, if you include Kade York, 20 players, starters, 20 starters from the 2019 LSU National Championship team that were drafted. The only players that went undrafted that started on that team were Thad Moss, Adrian McGee, and Glenn Logan. And Glenn Logan was good enough to be a draftable player, but just injuries were what cost him the opportunity to be drafted. But I'm telling you, man, we said it back in 2019 that history was going to be kind to that team. Because as those guys went on to the NFL and you saw the high draft picks in their NFL careers, you were going to keep for a decade plus saying, man, all those guys played together on that LSU team, like Burrow and Chase and Jefferson and Clyde and Patrick Queen and Caleb on Chasson and Grant Delpit. Like, all these guys are going into their career, and you're going to look back and say, man, all those guys were on that team. History continues to be kind to the 2019 LSU Tigers. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.